You're starting an elimination diet. You deserve some tips and tricks because they are hard. I know as a dad whose son experienced diarrhea and abdominal pain after we introduced solid food. Eventually, it became clear to us that food was the trigger for his symptoms, and we embarked on an elimination diet, and his symptoms improved. I hope that you can have the same success, and we offer these tips so that you can. My first tip follows up from our prior video where we talked about meal planning. And that is that your meal plan doubles as a symptom journal. As you plan a meal and you write it out for that day of the week, also include what symptoms you're having at that time. And with that, remember that your symptoms don't necessarily directly match the last meal that you had. It can sometimes be breakfast cause your symptoms later in the day, or last night's dinner is what you woke up with. But keep your symptom journal, and you'll start to notice patterns. You may identify additional triggers that you need to eliminate. My next tip is that you start with single whole foods as you're planning your meals. Now, that doesn't literally mean that you eat a carrot by itself, although that would be very gourmet. Instead, what we're talking about is use foods that you have to actually prepare from scratch. Peel the carrot, cut up the chicken. When you're preparing food from scratch, you know that you're not getting any processed ingredients in it, many of which are actually triggers for different food sensitivities. Whey protein is often used in many processed foods, and that could trigger dairy sensitivity. Soy and wheat are also often used as thickening agents or to give a savory flavor to different foods. The more that you start with whole foods, the better you'll do in your elimination diet. Let's make a chicken and rice soup. Rather than dumping a can of congealed chicken and rice, which can have lots of cross contact with wheat or other additives that are commonly used in food, let's start with a rotisserie chicken that we boil in water. Now you've made your own broth. Get the meat off the bone, put in a medley of vegetables, and now you've got your very own homemade chicken rice soup. If only you had some rice. Go get some rice. My next tip is on staying safely hydrated during your elimination diet. This is a marathon, not a sprint. For general information on safe drinking, please see the video linked below. Here I want to discuss how to ensure that the alcohol you may consume doesn't interfere with your elimination diet. Grains such as wheat and rye and barley will trigger gluten sensitivity, and these are commonly used to brew beer and many grain-based alcohol. Whiskey, vodka, and gin. So we want to avoid those alcohol and beer and look for substitutes. Ones to consider are rice-based beers, 100% corn bourbon, as well as tequila, that's 100% agave. My next tip is to get excited about this whole process. Don't just think about an elimination diet, what you're losing. Think about it as an opportunity to discover new foods. You may specifically find that if you venture into new cuisine that you've rarely tried, it tends to have such different foods that it's unlikely to have some of the triggers that you need to get rid of. So this is a chance to discover entire new types of cuisine. Not only is that important for you to be able to embark upon the next 4 weeks of elimination diet, but if you can't successfully reintroduce foods, then you need to be building a meal plan that you can be dedicated to for years to come. So take a positive approach to it and find the foods that intrigue you. You can also avoid certain foods that you just simply don't like. Just because you have to get rid of certain foods and you maybe feel like your diet is really narrow, you don't have to start eating foods that you've never liked before. Nobody's forcing you to eat mushrooms. So find the foods that you like and that you're excited to try. Make this whole process positive. My next tip is to be honest if you cheated. We said last time we're impulsive creatures. You're likely to have lapses. And when you do, be honest about those, because if you're talking with your GI doctor about your symptoms and you aren't honest about the fact that you've cheated, then you might start embarking upon an endoscopy or other test workup where really all you needed to do was explore how you might better incorporate the elimination diet into your everyday. This will ensure that you avoid needless workup and you can stay focused on what the goal here is to find out how these foods are actually triggering your symptoms. Now, in our prior video, we talked about the importance of doing a deadline. And so if you do cheat, reset a new deadline and look at that as a hard end to when you're going to stop this elimination diet and start a reintroduction phase. This again puts you into the mindset that you can't cheat strictly for the next coming weeks because you want to make sure come that deadline that you're going to switch into a mode of reintroducing foods, and you want to know that you've met your best baseline possible. I've got another trick for you. Food may be only half of your problem. The same plants we eat also produce pollen, which could also anger our immune system. So if you notice that your GI symptoms are at their worst when your seasonal allergies flare, then speak with an allergist to see if allergy shots may help you too. I hope that you found these tips and tricks helpful, whether you've hit a snag in your elimination diet or just starting out. Review our prior tips as well to get a better sense of how you can succeed. Hope you found this helpful. Thank you and be safe.